welcome to Romania.
Thank you.
How are you feeling?
Wonderful.
Well, that's nice to hear. We're going to start the interview, and my first question is, because our audience, I think, would like to hear about who you are and about how your alternative practice is different from the traditional one.
Okay. Well, I am a physician in the United States, and I practice asthma, immunology, and allergy. But I have a passion for teaching people about how food can be their medicine. And so we teach people that the way they eat, what they eat, the choices they make affect their health. And of course, today, are all over the world. Doesn't matter whether in Romania or United States, we all face chronic diseases. And top of the list is heart disease. And then we got type 2 diabetes and cancer and obesity. All of these chronic diseases can be prevented, treated, and even reversed by proper nutrition, proper diet.
Okay, tell me a bit about this program, Dinner with the Doctor.
So Dinner with the Doctor is a program that was created about 7 years ago to educate the public about diseases and nutrition, because physicians and the public don't get this sort of training and education. So we created the program to teach people about how food affects their diseases. So we first teach them about disease, about heart disease, and what causes heart disease. That it's not just our genes, it's not just our genetics that causes heart disease, because that's what many people believe. They believe that they get heart disease because their mom and dad had it, or their aunt and uncle. So we first teach them about the disease, and then we teach them about how nutrition, what they put in their mouths each day, can affect whether they're going to prevent heart disease, whether they're going to treat heart disease, or perhaps reverse it, because most people already have some degree of heart disease.
I see, but why do you think so many good doctors don't really embrace this kind of alternative medicine?
Yeah, so I think the reason is not so much that they don't like it, it's just they don't understand it and they haven't been taught. In medical schools today in the United States and in Romania as well, they don't teach nutrition. They teach us how to treat symptoms of diseases. They don't teach us how to prevent diseases. And actually, you used the word alternative medicine. I would say that this is real medicine rather than alternative medicine. And this is the way it should be. We as physicians should educate our patients in what causes diseases and how to prevent them.
I want to talk to you firstly about your documentary, Eating You Alive.
Yes.
What made you do it, and what is the most important message that you want to spread to the world with it or through it?
Right. So Eating You Alive the purpose was to, again, educate people and motivate people, because once you educate them and they understand, okay, this is what I should be doing, then you have to motivate them, and then you have to teach them how to do it, because eating this way, for most people, it's different. We grow up eating meats and potatoes and bad foods for us, and so when we teach them how to, cook the proper foods, we have to teach them how to put it all together. In other words, we have to teach them recipes. We have to teach them how to cook without oil, how to cook without meat, how to cook without dairy. So the documentary was actually meant to show both the science, that being the doctors showing that science and evidence-based medicine supports this way of eating and this way of approaching disease. And then secondly, we used people who had completed this course. In other words, people who were doing this and had reversed their disease. Maybe they had reversed their cancers, maybe they'd reversed their heart disease or their type 2 diabetes. So we had people in the film that had experienced it. And then lastly, we showed people how to do it. We had people come on and give recipes and cooking demonstrations and those sorts of things. So it was a combination of the science, the people that have been doing it, the motivation, and then the how-to.
All right. When did you start your personal journey? Because I don't know, were you raised as a vegan in your family, or was it at some point that you became?
Yeah. So I grew up eating meat and everything else.
Like the rest of us.
Like the rest of us. Yeah, exactly
Okay.
right. And my wife, however, I married my wife over 30 years ago, and she was a vegetarian, but I didn't become a vegetarian for quite some time. We were married for a while, and about 25 years ago I became a vegetarian, which meant I didn't eat meat, but I still ate eggs and dairy, and call it lacto-ovo-vegetarian. Eventually I became a vegan, and that was about 2001, so about 17 years ago. But you know, when you become a vegan, of course you eliminate all forms of animal products, including the egg and the dairy. But I wasn't a healthy vegan, because you can be a vegan and still eat lots of cookies and sweets and oil and salty stuff. So I ate lots of cookies and crackers and chips and things like that. So even though I was vegan, I wasn't a healthy vegan, and there's a difference. Then about 7 years ago, I read a book called The China Study by T. Colin Campbell. And then I started learning that there was more to being a vegan than just eliminating animal products, that there were unhealthy vegan foods, the processed foods and things like that. So when I eliminated those, then I no longer called myself a vegan, I called myself a whole food plant-based eater. In other words, whole foods that are unprocessed and plant-based. And I think that's a better definition of the program that I encourage my patients to use, whole food plant-based, and then in particular, I don't add oil to it as well, because oil is an unnecessary fat.
Okay. What is the key to a healthy life? Is it only in the nutrition, or can we talk about sports or active lifestyle?
You're right. So I think nutrition is a very important component, maybe the most important. But right behind it would be exercise, as you imply, staying active in some form, depending on how old you are or what you're able to do. Exercise is very important. Drinking water is very important. Getting sunlight, being outside is very important. Temperance like staying away from alcohol and drugs and smoking and those sorts of things. Fresh air is very important. Sleep is underestimated, but sleep is a very, very important component of all this. And then spirituality is important as well.
All right. Which are the most dangerous eating habits that we have in our current society?
There are a lot of dangerous eating habits, yeah. So I think they start with what we call fast food. Food that is prepared in small restaurants so that somebody can quickly order it and take it home and eat. Those foods are full of fat, oil, they're full of salt, and they're full of sugar. And the reason the food industry puts it in there is because those tastes become addictive to you. And so then you want to go back for more and for more. So trying to get the processed foods, the salty, the sugary, the fatty foods out is those are the dangerous foods. Then right behind that would be your animal products. Animal products such as red meat, white meat, poultry, and dairy, and eggs. All of the animal products carry a lot of high saturated fat, and saturated fat has been associated not only with heart disease, of course, but also with cancer and with type 2 diabetes. Most people, we can talk about diabetes, but most people think diabetes is too much sugar, but actually it's related to too much fat. The other problem with the animal products is the animal protein. Animal protein specifically has been associated with promoting cancer growth. Plant protein, on the other hand, is not associated with cancer growth. So from the animal product standpoint, it's the animal protein and the saturated fat that make them so poor. In addition, they have zero fiber, no fiber. Fiber is very important. You get fiber from your plant foods, your beans and your vegetables and your fruit, those sorts of things. So getting more plant food into the diet, getting the fast foods out of the diet, getting the animal products out of the diet are the most important components of the whole food plant-based approach.
So basically you're saying that people were a lot healthier, let's say 50 years ago or so, when this industry of fast food and everything wasn't so spread around the world.
Yes, if you look at the obesity rates around the world, they have been increasing over the last 50 years or more. And I asked the question, have the genetics of the people changed? No, they have not. Have what we put in our mouth. Has that changed? Yes, that's changed a lot. So we also, same thing with heart disease and cancer rates. Type 2 diabetes, we used to call type 2 diabetes adult onset diabetes, but now we're seeing it in children, so they had to change the name. And it's because the children are becoming overweight and obese, and they're eating just like their parents. The parents, teach them how to eat, and we're seeing more and more type 2 diabetes because of that.
I see. In what other ways do these bad habits impact our health?
Well, I think from the chronic disease standpoint, number one, but also from inflammatory diseases, like arthritis, autoimmune conditions as well are impacted by these, because these types of foods promote more inflammation in the body as well, and that can cause an array of different diseases. So getting these foods out, many people who adopt this whole food plant-based approach, once they get those foods out, they realize other things that they had, like their arthritis is starting to get better because the inflammation goes down. So it affects you in a lot of different ways. It also affects you mentally, the way we think. It clears your mind because it gets a lot of the bad foods out, a lot of the toxins out of your body, and then you start to think clearer as well.
Okay. In the first day of conference, you're talking about heart diseases. Could you sum up a bit what you are going to talk about?
Sure.
And what do we have to keep in mind about it?
So number one, I tell people how important it is. In other words, it is the number one killer, number one cause of death worldwide, not just in Romania, not just in the United States, but worldwide. Heart disease is the number one killer. Number two is that in most cases, it's preventable. And most people kind of find that to be surprising, that you can actually prevent heart disease. And I think that's important for people to understand, because again, we like to blame everything on our genetics. Well, I've got this because mom had it, because my aunt had it, my cousin had it, whoever. But I teach people that it's not just our genetics that control disease. Then thirdly, I teach them about the process of how heart disease develops, and how using medications alone is not the way to take care of this problem, but rather we need to prevent the condition. And once you learn to prevent it, then you can actually treat the disease with your nutrition. So we teach them about the condition, and then probably the most important thing we teach them is what food should you be eating and how should you be eating them. Because again, unless we teach that component, it's not going to be successful, because we can be well educated on a condition and understand the disease and why it happens, but unless we teach how to put it into practice in your lifestyle, in your daily life, then we fail.
I understand. What is the connection between cancer and alimentation, basically?
In other words, what we eat and how does that affect cancer? Well, cancer, first of all, is a very complex condition. So it's not just one single thing that causes cancer or prevents cancer. It's an array of things, including what we eat. There's lots of carcinogens or cancer-causing agents in the food that we eat, whether it be the preservatives, the nitrates that are in meat, the protein that's in meat, all of these different things. So there's a lot of different food components. But also our environment can cause cancer as well. Anything that causes damage to our DNA can lead to cancer. Each one of us have a few cancer cells running around in our body, but a good immune system takes care of those cancer cells so that cancer doesn't overwhelm us. It's when our immune system gets low or we start feeding that cancer with the wrong types of things in our body that the cancers run and grow very large. And animal protein in particular is one that's been shown to increase certain types of cancer dramatically, because they cause an increase of a hormone in our body called IGF-1, insulin-like growth factor 1. And this receptor is on cancer cells. And so when you have more of that hormone, it causes cancer cells to grow. So animal protein specifically tends to increase this IGF-1.
I understand. The last conference is going to be about diabetes and obesity. You already talked about this a bit, but I was curious, firstly, why it has spread so much in our current society, which you have a bit explained before, and also how can we stop it, because we've proven that before we did it. So
yeah, great question. So first of all, type 2 diabetes and type 1 diabetes. Type 1 diabetes is genetic. However, it can also be improved with this condition, but not complete with this approach, but not completely reversed. Type 2 diabetes, which accounts for about 90% of the cases of diabetes worldwide, is type 2 diabetes, is much a lifestyle-related disease. In fact, some people call it diabesity. In other words, obesity and type 2 diabetes go together. That's not to say that you couldn't have type 2 diabetes without being obese, because you can, but the majority have obesity coupled with it. And the problem is that you get a condition that's called insulin resistance, which means that the cells in your body are resistant to insulin and they don't work very well. Insulin is the component that puts sugar inside our cells, the glucose that our body needs to work. Well, when cells become insulin resistant, they don't let the glucose into the cells as well as they should, and glucose backs up in the bloodstream and you get a high blood sugar, and thus you have diabetes. So people automatically think that diabetes is caused by eating too much sugar. But the reality is that this condition of insulin resistance is actually caused by too much fat in the diet. Saturated fat, and I'm going to use the word clogs up, it sort of causes a problem within the cells so that the signaling processes, which are very complex, the signaling processes between the insulin receptors that let the glucose in, they don't work very well because of this too much fat in the cells. Once you start to remove that saturated fat, in particular by removing animal products which have the saturated fat, by removing the oils or minimizing the oils, then those cells become more insulin sensitive, and then this condition of insulin resistance starts to go away, and you can actually reverse type 2 diabetes. That may have been more than you wanted, but
no, it's great information.
And so the second part of that is, how do we do that? So the key steps in reversing type 2 diabetes, number one is to remove the animal products, because as I mentioned before, it gets the saturated fat out. Number two is ideally eliminate if you can, if not, at least minimize the amount of added oil that you have in your diet. Number three is getting the processed foods out of the diet. Those are the foods that are full of the salt and the sugar and the fat and those sorts of things. And then of course keeping the fiber high in the diet. Those four steps will help reverse type 2 diabetes. Then the part behind that is, how did we get to this obesity problem to begin with? And again, it's what we choose to put in our mouth each day. We put in a lot of processed foods that are full of all the wrong things. So then we have to teach people, what can we put into our diet that will make us healthy and make us lose weight? When we lose the weight, we reverse the type 2 diabetes. And so we teach a component called calorie density. Which foods have the most calories for the amount of weight? So calorie density is just how many calories there are in any particular given weight of food. So foods that are very calorie dense, those are going to be things like meat and nuts. Not that nuts are bad, they're good, but they're full of fat. Junk food, okay, processed foods, those are all very calorie dense foods. Whereas low calorie density foods, beans, whole grains, fruits, vegetables, all of those you can pretty much eat all you want. You don't have to count calories. You're going to stay full. That's one of the things people complain about with diets is, oh, I only get a little bit of this and a little bit of that and I'm hungry. But when you teach them about calorie density, stay away from the foods that are very high in calories for the amount you're going to get, and instead put large amounts of low calorie density food into your diet. That will help you have a satisfied feeling, so you feel full, and it will also help your body to maintain the proper weight as well. Back to nuts for just a minute. Nuts and seeds are very good foods for you, but you don't want to eat a whole bag of them, okay, because they're full of lots of calories. So I encourage people to eat nuts and seeds, at least an ounce or more a day. And you say, well, what is an ounce? An ounce is what fits in the palm of your hand. So you should be eating 1 to 2 ounces of nuts every day. They're very healthy food. But if you sit down and eat the whole bag, then you can, knock back about 2,000 calories, no problem. And that's a high calorie density food.
I believe that why people tend to go to fast foods is because of the lack of time that is, growing in our society right now.
Sure.
It's a trend. So I believe this is a big con when it comes to being vegan and so on, because at least in Romania, I'm speaking about Romania.
Sure, no, you're right.
You cannot find certain things to cook, and you can't find the time to constantly cook and so on. So how can it get easier for people to understand that it's healthier and to be also time effective?
Yeah, that's an excellent question, and that's one of the barriers, if you will, to being vegan or being whole food plant-based. And so there's several things to think about there. Number one is, you're right, it's very difficult in Romania, in the United States, to just go to any restaurant and find a healthy meal, right? So one of the areas that we need to work with is educating restaurants in what is really truly healthy, because what they think is healthy is not necessarily. So that's important, because people eat out. They like to eat out. It's a very social thing. Eating is a social thing. And so it's important that restaurants slowly, they will slowly get the idea once they have customers coming in asking for it. But unless the customers are coming in and asking for it, they see no need for it. So I think it's important for those of us eating whole food, plant-based, or vegan, that we talk with people, not in a way that says, oh, you're serving bad food, but no, could you serve this in addition to what you're serving, could you also serve this? This would really be healthy and this would be good for me. That way you're not condemning them for what they're doing, but yet just asking them to add on. Secondly, you talk about we're a busy society, and it's getting busier and busier. So one of the problems we have day to day with going to work, and so sometimes we go to work and we just grab whatever we can for lunch. We go down to the corner restaurant or whatever and just grab some fast food because that's quick and easy, and I'm hungry, right? So it does require some planning on your part. I call it cooking ahead. So many people will actually cook maybe for the week. They'll cook on the weekend, spend a few hours, they'll cook several dishes, and then put it in the freezer or the refrigerator and eat through the week. So they don't have to come home every night and prepare a full meal and make a full recipe, because that is very time consuming and it's going to cause you to fail. And then in addition, you have to start putting it in the scale. In other words, saying, what is my health worth versus my lifestyle? And you have to put those two together, because right now, young people in particular, they look and they say, I'm healthy, I don't need to worry about this. But what happens is, over time, and it doesn't take long, sometimes their 20s, certainly 30s and 40s, they start to get high blood pressure, they start to get high cholesterol. They say, well, maybe my health is more important. So I'm encouraging the young people to get involved early while they still have good health. And then they can teach the older people this is the way we should be eating, and they can also teach their children that this is the way we should be eating. So it's not an easy thing. It's going to be little by little, but I think it's a very, very important thing. It's going to affect not just how long we live, but the quality of our life going forward. Because we might live longer because medications and doctors and hospitals can keep us alive longer, but our quality of life is not near what it should be. What I encourage is a long life that's full of quality, so that we can enjoy life and not spend time going to the doctor, going to the pharmacy, going to the hospital, and just being debilitated.
So basically, we really can have it all.
We can, but as you say, it does take a bit of work and a bit of planning. And as this message of we can prevent disease, we can treat disease, we can reverse disease, as that message gets more widespread, we will start to see more restaurants, more things in the grocery stores that will help us to adopt that type of lifestyle. But right now, we're still in the early infancy stages of this. But But what's really important to understand is that there is so much science, there's so much evidence-based medicine to back up what we're doing that it's only a matter of time that it will grow larger.
It's true, and I think the price is also something to take into consideration, because I've seen all the bio products, or at least in Romania, are really like more expensive than the other ones. And that is a problem, because it's not making a person buying more when financial situation in Romania is not exactly.
Well, you're exactly right, and it's like that in many other parts of the world as well. Bad food is cheap, and in our country, part of that is that the government subsidizes some of that. So you're right, we need to make good food more affordable. But with that said, you can buy good food fairly cheap. People forget the fact that beans is a very healthy food, and it's a very cheap food. When you get rid of the meat, beans sort of become almost like your meat. They're like the main part of the meal, some sort of beans, whether it be pinto beans, black beans, lentils, those sorts of things. And then also adding starches to our diet are important. People think, oh, potatoes are going to make me fat, or starchy vegetables are bad. Starchy vegetables are good. They should be part of a whole food plant-based diet, and those are cheap. But you're right, bad food is the cheapest around, whether it be Romania, United States, or other parts of the world. So that needs to change as well, and I'd love to see the government start to subsidize the good food, and in the long run, it's going to pay off, because our healthcare costs will go down. Right now, they say there's a healthcare crisis, but really it's a health crisis. It's our health that is the problem. Once we get our health in line, the healthcare is going to be a lot easier.
And now for the last question, very succinctly, could you tell us what we can do in order to lead a more healthy life? And maybe, you could recommend us a book, or, a study or something that could inspire us, educate us.
Sure. So the first component is what you said, educate, because you have to understand the why. Otherwise, you're just doing it because somebody told you. So it's best if you can be educated and understand. So with that education, it's very important that you get the right sources to educate you, because there's a lot of confusing and really wrong information out there. So there's a website that I encourage people to use. It's called nutritionfacts.org. That is a free website. It is reliable, science-based information. So when you go to that website, you can find good information. There's another website that's Dr. T. Colin Campbell's website, nutritionstudies.org, another very reliable website, because when people start to do this, they have a lot of questions. They hear and say, okay, I want to do this, but 2 days, 2 weeks, 3 months into this, they have questions. Both of those websites can help answer that. And then again, I think it's important to look at this not as a diet that you're going to start and then you're going to stop it. Look at it as a lifestyle change. Don't see it as something that you're going to do for 6 months or 1 year and then you're going to stop. Think of it as a lifestyle change that's going to change your health tremendously. The other thing is, for people who are skeptical or doubtful, do try it for 10 days. Try it for 3 weeks. There are several websites. One is pcrm.org that will give you a 21-day kickstart kind of thing. So that way you can give it a try, say, all right, I'll do it for 21 days, and then see how well you feel. Then you're going to be more motivated as well going forward. As far as books, there's lots of great books out there. I think the one for me that turned the corner for me is The China Study by T. Colin Campbell and his son Thomas Campbell. I think those are it's a very important book to sort of get an overview of why this is important. Other books, How Not to Die by Dr. Michael Greger. Sounds interesting, right? It's one of the best books out there on looking at the science behind the whole food plant-based approach. So, How Not to Die by Michael Greger, Greger. And he's also the person who does the nutritionfacts.org as well.
All right. Would you like to say something else?
think we covered it.
Okay.
Unless you have something
Perfect.
more that you would like to.
No, that would be my question. So
Okay.
thank you very much for this
Sure.
interview.
My privilege.